Welcome to Relative, our family mess. Here, I bring you the raw, unspoken stories of older men betrayed by the very families they spent a lifetime protecting, and the dark secrets hidden within the modern home. Now, here is today's story.
My son left me to freeze in the mountains on the coldest night of the year. He set a stack of papers on my lap, told me to sign away everything his mother and I had built. And when I refused, he drove off into the storm. At 69, I sat alone on a frozen bench, watching his taillights disappear into the white. He believed an old baker would panic and give up. What he never imagined was that I had spent 3 months getting ready for exactly this betrayal. But that night came later. Let me start where it really began, in the dark before dawn, with the smell of bread. I have woken at 4 in the morning for 40 years. The body learns a rhythm and keeps it long after the reason fades. That morning was no different. The radiator ticked in the hallway. Outside, the first snow of December had settled over Pittsburgh, soft and gray under the street lights. I stood in my kitchen in an old flannel shirt and listened to the house breathe. The oven timer still sat on the counter, the little brass bell Celia bought in 1981. We were broke that year, one rented storefront and a second-hand mixer, and she spent good money on a timer with a real bell because she said a kitchen should sound like a kitchen. I wound it out of habit now, though I had no dough rising. I just liked the ticking. It made the silence smaller. 4 years she had been gone. 4 years of pouring 2 cups of coffee and drinking 1. Celia died on an ordinary Tuesday in May, out in the orchard behind our house, kneeling in the dirt beside the walnut tree she had planted on our wedding day. A stroke, the doctors said. Fast. She was there among the apple blossoms one moment and gone the next. And I have never been able to look at that tree without my chest going tight. I poured my coffee into her blue mug, the one with the chip on the handle she refused to replace. Then I opened the drawer beside the sink and took out the folded paper I kept there. Her handwriting had not faded. Blue ink, careful and slanted. The way she wrote out recipes. Across the top, she had written, "Things to remember when I'm gone." Below it, 7 lines. She wrote that list 3 weeks before the stroke, as if some quiet part of her already knew. Pay your people first. Never sign what you have not read twice. The orchard is not for sale. Not ever. And the 7th line, the one that always stopped me cold. Don't let love blind you to the truth. I read it every morning. Most mornings it was just a comfort, the sound of her voice in my head. That morning it felt like a hand on my shoulder. Celia used to say a thing about our trade. Dough doesn't lie. Lennon, you can fake a smile, you can fake a handshake. But flour and water and time will always tell you exactly what you put into them. Underbake it and you'll know. Cut corners and the bread will know first. I built 11 bakeries on that idea. Henson's hearth, real bread, no shortcuts. People in this city grew up on it. The phone rang at 5:15, far too early. I knew before I answered who it would be. My son, Dakari, had not called me before noon in years. He called on holidays out of duty, the way a man pays a parking ticket. But the screen lit up with his name in the dark kitchen, and something in my stomach tightened the way it does when bread comes out wrong, and you cannot yet say why. "Morning, Dad." His voice was bright, too bright. "Hope I didn't wake you. I know you're an early bird." "You did not wake me," I said. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Can't a man call his father?" He laughed, and the laugh was wrong, too. A half-beat late. Listen, I've been thinking. It's almost the anniversary. You know, Mom's. I thought maybe you and I could take a drive this week. Up to the lake house. Sign some estate paperwork. Clear it all up. And stop by. You know. Pay our respects. I held the coffee and said nothing for a moment. Outside, the snow kept falling. Dakari had not set foot in that orchard in 4 years. He had skipped his mother's first memorial, called in sick to the second. He had never once asked to drive anywhere with me, never once mentioned the lake house his mother loved. Now, with a winter storm forecast for the very week he suggested, he wanted to talk about Celia and sign paperwork. That's a kind thought, I said carefully. Great. Wednesday. Then, I'll pick you up early. A pause. Then, softer. Almost rehearsed. I miss her. Dad. I just want to do right by her. He had never once, in 4 years, said that he missed her. I set the mug down on the counter beside Celia's list, and her 7th line looked up at me in blue ink. The brass bell on the timer ticked toward 6. My son had never cared about that orchard in his life, so why? I wondered. Had his voice shaken when he mentioned it? Dakari arrived 25 minutes early. That alone told me more than anything he would say all day. My son had been late his whole life. Late to his own high school graduation. Late to the hospital the night his daughter was born. Late. By 40 minutes. To the church the day we buried his mother. Punctuality was a language he had never learned to speak. Yet there he was at 6:35 on Wednesday morning, headlights swinging into my driveway through the falling snow. A full 25 minutes before he said he'd come. I watched him from the kitchen window, coffee going cold in my hand. A man who is early is a man who could not sleep. He stepped out into the cold and stretched, breath clouding white. And even from the window I could see the smile already fixed on his face. It was the smile he wore when he wanted something. I had seen it across 1,000 dinner tables. The trouble with that smile was that it never reached his eyes. And after 40 years of reading people the way I read Doe, I had learned to watch the eyes. I went out to meet him on the porch. Dad. He pulled me into a quick hug, all shoulders, the kind men give when they're performing closeness. You look good. You ready? But I was not looking at him. I was looking past him, at the vehicle in my driveway. It was a gray pickup, a rental, the kind that comes off a lot looking like every other truck in America. Dakari drove a black Yukon, had for years. Leased it new every 2 seasons because he liked people to see him in it. I walked down the porch steps in the snow and ran my hand along the cold fender. Where's the Yukon? His smile flickered, just for a beat. In the shop. Transmission thing. This is a loaner. I came around to the back bumper. There, in the lower corner of the rear window, was a small sticker. A rental company logo. The local airport branch. Not a dealer loaner. A rental. Paid for. Anonymous. The kind of vehicle that leaves no record tied to your own name. 40 years of running a business teaches you that the small details are where the truth hides. People lie with their mouths. Receipts and stickers do not. Cold one today, Dakari said behind me, too quickly. We should get on the road before it gets worse. I glanced through the rear passenger window. On the back seat sat a black leather briefcase, the expensive kind, half covered by a folded overcoat. The coat had slipped just enough that I could read 2 gold-embossed words on the leather. Legal documents. A man does not bring a briefcase of legal documents to visit his mother's grave. The passenger door of the truck opened, and my daughter-in-law stepped out into the snow. Mila. Slim, composed, dressed for a boardroom rather than a snowstorm, her dark coat buttoned to the throat. She gave me a smile as smooth and cool as glass. "Lennon," she said, "it's so good of you to come. Dakari's been wanting to do this for ages." I had met Mila perhaps a dozen times in the years she had been married to my son. Every meeting had left me with the same odd feeling, the sense of being assessed, weighed, the way a man at an auction looks at a thing he means to bid on. She always called me Lennon, never Dad. I had never decided whether that was honesty or distance. "It's good to see you both," I said. And I smiled too, and my smile was as false as theirs, because here is the thing my son did not know. The thing his wife in her cool buttoned coat could not have guessed. I had known for 3 months. I had known since the morning in September, when I sat in my office above the flagship bakery and found a hole in the books. Money gone where no money should go. A pattern too clean to be a mistake. I had known when I made a quiet phone call to a man who used to carry a badge. I had known through every careful week since, as the picture filled in, line by line, the way a photograph rises out of the developer. I knew about the debt. I knew about the papers in that briefcase. I knew what they meant to do, so I did the only thing that would give me the truth past all doubt. I let them think I knew nothing. "Let me get my bag," I said. I went inside, took the small overnight bag I had packed the night before, and on my way out I slipped Celia's folded list into my shirt pocket, against my chest, where I could feel it. Don't let love blind you to the truth. I had spent 3 months making sure it would not. Dakari held the truck door open for me with that wide, anxious smile, the snow gathering on his shoulders. "After you, Dad," he said, and I climbed into that truck, into the cold and the gray and the long road to north, knowing exactly what my son had planned for me at the other end of it. The city thinned out behind us within the hour. Pittsburgh gave way to gray suburbs, then to long stretches of bare trees and frozen fields, and finally to the foothills of the Alleghenies rising ahead, blue and cold against a low sky. The snow came harder the higher we climbed. Dakari drove with both hands tight on the wheel, the wipers dragging back and forth, and the heater pushed warm air that did nothing to cut the chill between the 3 of us. Mila sat in the back now. She had moved there at the first gas stop, saying she wanted to make some calls, and I had not argued. From the passenger seat, I watched the road unspool, the lane markers vanishing under fresh powder, the guardrails the only thing standing between us, and a long white drop. "You comfortable?" "Dad," Dakari asked. "You can put the seat back if you want. It's a couple hours yet." "I'm fine," I said. But I was tired in the way old men get tired. And there was an idea forming in me, slow and quiet, the way a good dough comes together. So I reclined the seat a few inches, turned my face toward the window, and let my eyes drift closed. I made my breathing long and even. I let my mouth fall slack. I gave them the picture of a worn-out old man, lulled to sleep by the warm cab and the hum of the road. It did not take long. I heard Dakari's phone buzz softly in the cup holder, heard the small click as he answered it through the truck's speakers, then thought better of it and pressed the phone to his ear instead. But the cab was small, and the road noise was steady, and my hearing has always been sharper than people assume. I kept my eyes shut and my breathing slow, and I listened. "Yeah," Dakari said, low. "No, he's out. Sleeping." A pause. "I know what day it is, Mila. I know." His voice dropped further, tight with strain. "Kingsley's not the problem right now. The problem is getting him to sign." I did not move. I let the name settle into me. Not Kingsley. Kelvin. Kelvin Villegas. I knew that name. I had spent 3 months learning it. The lender my son had gone to when the bank said no. The kind of man who does not send letters when a debt comes due, from the back seat. Low and clear. Mila's voice answered. She had not pressed her phone to her ear. She trusted the sleeping old man too much for that. "Then make him sign before we turn around," she said. Her tone was flat, businesslike, the tone of a woman reading a balance sheet. "Kelvin wants the full 800 by the end of the month. Dakari, that's 12 days. The only way we clear it is the property. And the only way we touch the property is that signature." "He keeps asking about it," Dakari said. "What if he reads it in balks?" "He won't read it. He's an old man burying his wife all over again. You get him out there. You let him get emotional at the grave. And you put the pages in his hands while he's soft. Tell him it's routine. Tell him it's what Mom would have wanted." I kept my face to the window. The glass was cold against my cheek. Outside, the snow fell in long white lines. "And if he still says no," Dakari asked. There was a silence then. 3 seconds. 4. The tires hissed over wet asphalt. "Then we do it the way we planned," Mila said quietly. "The cold does the rest. Either way, we come back with the signature." The way we planned. I had known. You understand. For 3 months, I had known the shape of this thing. The debt and the forged lease and the papers and the scheme. But knowing a thing on paper and hearing it spoken aloud are 2 different creatures. And the second one has teeth. To hear my son say the cold does the rest as easily as a man orders coffee. To hear him agree in that small, warm cab, while I lay there pretending to sleep an arm's length away. That carved something out of my chest that no folder of evidence ever had. "Okay," Dakari murmured. "Okay, I'll handle it. Don't call me after," Mila said. "Text. And Dakari, make sure he signs every page." The line went dead. I heard Dakari let out a long breath and set the phone back in the cup holder. He turned the radio on. Low. Something soft and instrumental. The kind of music a man plays to drown out the sound of his own thoughts. I opened my eyes a sliver and looked at the road ahead. Climbing into the white, the guardrails thinning, the world emptying out of everything but snow and stone, and the 2 people in this truck who had just spoken of my death like a line item. I let the seat stay back. I let them think I slept. 12 days. I thought. $800,000. A debt to a man named Kelvin Villegas. And a son who believed the cold would do for him what he didn't have the stomach to do himself. He had no idea I had already counted every dollar of it. He had no idea who was waiting on the road behind us. We had been climbing for almost 2 hours when Dakari slowed the truck and turned off the highway. The sign was half buried in snow. "Rest area," it said. The kind of lonely roadside stop that exists for truckers and travelers in summer and stands abandoned in deep winter. A low cinder block building with dark windows. A row of empty parking spaces. A single picnic shelter and a few iron benches. all of it under a foot of fresh powder. There was not another vehicle in sight. There was not another soul for miles. Dakari pulled into a space and shifted into park, but left the engine running. "Before we go any farther," he said, "I need you to sign something." He reached into the back seat. Mila did not look at me. She kept her eyes forward, her gloved hands folded in her lap, and that told me more than any word could. He came back with the black briefcase, set it on his knees, and drew out a thick stack of documents bound with a heavy clip. "What is it?" I asked, though I knew. "Estate paperwork, power of attorney. Mostly. Just lets me manage things if anything happens to you. Handle the properties. Keep it all simple." He held it out across the cab. "Routine stuff. Dad. Mom's lawyer recommended it. Celia's lawyer had recommended no such thing. Eugene Richard had drawn up our wills together in this very state. And Eugene had told me 3 weeks ago, over coffee in his office, exactly what my son was building." I took the pages. I read them slowly, the way Celia taught me. Never sign what you have not read twice. The first page was ordinary enough, the second too. The third stopped me. Absolute and unrestricted power of attorney. The right to sell real estate without notice. To transfer assets without consent. To liquidate accounts without limit. It was not a safeguard. It was a key to my whole life. Cut to fit his hand. "This isn't routine," I said quietly. I turned to a different page, the one I had been waiting to find. And neither was the orchard lease back in October, the one with my signature on it, the one I never signed. The cab went very still. "You forged my name," I said, "on a lease for the property your mother is buried on. You signed it over to a company, didn't you? And waited to see if anyone would notice. Nobody did. So, now you've come for the rest." Dakari's jaw worked. The bright, anxious smile was gone now, scraped away by the cold light off the snow. "You don't understand how any of this works anymore. Dad, you're getting old. You forget things. I don't forget anything," I said. "I remember every loaf I've ever burned. I remember the day your mother died in that orchard. And I remember that I never signed that lease." "Sign the papers." His voice had gone flat, stripped of warmth. "Sign them and we'll drive on, and this all gets easier for everybody." I folded the documents in half and set them on the dashboard. "No," I said. For a long moment he just stared at me, and I watched something close behind his eyes. Some last door swinging shut. Then he reached across me, opened the passenger door from the inside, and a blast of frozen air poured into the cab. "Get out," he said. I looked at my son, at the boy Celia had rocked to sleep, the boy I had taught to knead dough standing on a stool at the counter, his small hands white with flour. I looked for him, and I could not find him. "Dakari, get out of the car, Dad!" I got out. The cold hit me like a wall, dry and savage, the kind of cold that steals the breath before you can name it. My shoes sank into the snow. Dakari got out his side, came around, and dragged my overnight bag from the back seat. He threw it onto the white ground at my feet. Then he reached in and pulled out 2 water bottles, half frozen already, and dropped them beside the bag. From his wallet, he took a single $20 bill and held it out into the wind. "When you're ready to sign," he said, "call me. There's a town about 15 miles down the grade. Phone works again past the ridge. You'll figure it out. You always do." I did not take the money. He let it fall into the snow. Mila did not turn her head. Through the windshield, I could see her profile, calm and still. A woman waiting for an errand to be done. Dakari climbed back behind the wheel and shut the door. The engine revved, the tires spun, caught, and the gray truck pulled out of the lot, fishtailing once on the ice before it found the highway and accelerated away. I stood there in the falling snow and watched the taillights shrink, 2 red points dissolving into the white, until there was nothing left but the wind and the long, empty grade, and the cold settling into my bones. For 3 months I had planned for this. I had thought I understood the size of it. But standing alone in that frozen lot, 69 years old, watching my own blood drive away and leave me to die, I felt a doubt I had not let myself feel before. I had counted on knowing my enemy. I had not counted on him being my son. The first 10 minutes, anger kept me warm. I picked up my bag because leaving it in the snow felt like surrender. And I started down the grade the way Dakari had pointed, into the wind. My collar turned up, telling myself 15 miles was nothing. I had walked harder roads. I had carried 100-pound flour sacks up basement stairs at 20 and framed a bakery roof at 50. 15 miles. I could do 15 miles. But the mountain did not care what I had done at 20. The cold is not like the heat. The heat presses on you, slows you, makes you beg for shade. The cold is quieter than that. It is patient. It works its way in through the seams of your coat and the soles of your shoes. And it takes your fingers first, then your face, then your thinking. One small theft at a time. So gently, you almost do not notice you are being robbed of yourself. Within half an hour, my feet had gone numb. My hands would not close. The wind drove the snow sideways into my eyes until the road and the sky were the same blank white, and I could no longer tell how far I had come or how far I had left. I stopped trying to walk the grade and turned back toward the rest stop. Some animal part of me wanting shelter. The cinder block wall, anything to break the wind. I made it as far as one of the iron benches under the picnic shelter. I should not have sat down. I knew that even then. In the slow fog the cold had made of my mind. You do not sit down in weather like that. But my legs had stopped listening to me, and the bench was there. And I told myself I would rest only a moment. I pulled my knees up and tucked my hands into my armpits and curled against the cold. And I thought of Celia. I thought of her in the orchard in spring, the blossoms in her hair, laughing at some joke I have long since forgotten. I thought, strangely, that this was not the worst way to go, to simply grow quiet under the snow and drift toward her. The thought frightened me, because it did not frighten me enough. Then there was light, headlights, swinging across the snow, throwing my own shadow long against the cinder block wall. I heard an engine, the crunch and squeak of tires on packed snow, a vehicle slowing where no vehicle should have any reason to slow. A door opened, boots hit the ground. Fast. Hey, mister, you with me? A hand on my shoulder. Shaking me. A face swimming into focus above me, weathered, dark-bearded, maybe in its late 50s. A knit cap pulled down low, and real fear in the eyes. Lord, you're freezing. Come on now, up you get. My truck's right here, it's warm. Come on. He got an arm under me and hauled me up off that bench, and he was strong the way working men are strong, and he half carried me across the lot to an old work truck with the engine running and the heater roaring. He poured me into the passenger seat, cranked the vents toward me, and pulled a flannel jacket off the back bench and tucked it around my legs. You stay awake. You hear me? Talk to me. What's your name? Lennon. I managed. My lips would barely move. Henson. All right. Lennon. I'm Roger. Roger Cabrera. I do pipes and boilers all over this county. And I'm telling you, you are about the luckiest man alive, because nobody comes up this stretch this time of year. I only swung in here because I needed to take a leak. God's honest truth. He poured coffee from a steel thermos into the cup of the lid and pressed it into my shaking hands. Drink that. Slow. The coffee was hot and bitter, and the best thing I have ever tasted. I held it in both numb hands and felt the heat begin its slow climb back into my body. How'd you end up out here? Roger asked, watching the road through his window, the snow flying through the headlights. Where's your car? I looked at him. At this stranger who had stopped to use a rest stop bathroom and found a dying man instead, and who had not hesitated, not for 1 second, to wrap his own coat around my legs. A stranger had stopped for me. My own son had driven away. My family left me here, I said. Roger went quiet. He looked at me for a long moment, and something hard came into his weathered face. The honest anger of a decent man hearing something indecent. He nodded slowly, then reached up and tapped a small black box mounted on his windshield. A little camera, its lens pointed out at the road. Well, he said, I run a dash cam in this old girl. On account of the deer up here'll total you and lie about it. He put the truck in gear. It's been recording the whole way in. Caught your folks' taillights leaving, I'd bet. And it caught me finding you. So whatever's going on here, mister, there's a record of it now. He pulled out onto the highway, the heater roaring, the snow streaming past. He did not know it yet. Neither did I. Not fully. But the small black box on that stranger's windshield had just become the first piece of proof that my son had tried to kill me. Roger drove me 20 miles down the grade to a roadside diner just past the ridge, where the cell towers came back to life and the windows glowed warm and yellow against the dark. Let's get something hot in you, he said. Then we'll figure out who to call. Sheriff, family, whoever. I did not tell him there was already someone to call. I did not have to, because when Roger pushed open the diner door, the bell jangling overhead, a man rose from a corner booth near the back as if he had been waiting all evening. He had, in fact, been waiting most of his life for moments like this one. He was a big man gone solid with age, 54, in a canvas coat and work boots, with the flat, steady eyes of a man who had spent 15 years looking at things other people looked away from. Mr. Henson, he said, and crossed the room to me. Thank God. Roger stopped short, one hand still on the door. You know this fella. His name is Bellamy Solomon, I said. He works for me. I turned to Bellamy, and my voice came out rougher than I meant it. You lost me. I did. There was no excuse in how he said it, only fact. He guided me into the warm booth, and Roger slid in across from us, wary now, watching. I had a vehicle 2 cars back from your son the whole way out of the city. I had a tracker on the rental and a satellite phone for exactly this. Then the storm came over the ridge and the GPS dropped, and the visibility went to nothing. And your son turned off at a rest stop I didn't clear in time. His jaw tightened. By the time I doubled back, you were gone, and a work truck was pulling out with you in it. I've been 3 exits behind that truck for 40 minutes praying it was a good Samaritan. He looked at Roger. It was. Roger sat back slowly, taking this in. "You hired a private eye," he said to me. "Before today. 3 months ago," I said. "A waitress brought coffee none of us had ordered." Bellamy waited until she left, then set a thin folder on the table and turned it toward me. "You should see where things stand," he said. "All of it, in one place." I opened the folder with hands that had only just learned to close again. Inside was 3 months of my life, laid out in cold order. Bank records. The hole in the bakery accounts I had first found in September, traced now to its source. A copy of the forged orchard lease, my own signature staring up at me. A signature I never made. Photographs. Dates. The name Kelvin Villegas circled in Bellamy's neat block letters, with a column of figures beside it that made my stomach turn, and a single line, underlined twice. Subject DH and spouse ML. Multiple meetings. Location unconfirmed. DH is Dakari, I said. ML is Mila. Yes. Bellamy paused. And I think you should know, Mr. Henson, that the more I dug into your daughter-in-law, the less her story held together. There are things about Mila that don't add up. I'm not ready to put them in front of you tonight. Not after what you've been through. But soon, across the table, Roger let out a low breath and rubbed his face with one big hand. "Mister," he said to me, "I want you to know, I'd have stopped for anybody freezing on that bench, but knowing it was your own boy that put you there." He shook his head. "I got a daughter. I can't make that sit right in my head." "You have a dash cam," Bellamy said to him, and it was not quite a question. "I do. Would you be willing to give me that footage? Properly. With your name on a statement." Roger looked at me, then back at Bellamy, and nodded once. Firm. Whatever the old man needs. I sat in that warm booth, the coffee steaming in front of me, the storm flinging itself against the dark window. And I understood that the trap I had spent 3 months building had just closed around the one thing I had never been able to prove. Not the theft, the intent, the willingness to leave me in the snow to die. I had known my son was a thief. Now I had a stranger's camera and a detective's folder to prove he was something far worse. Bellamy leaned forward, his voice low and even. "There's a road out of this that ends with a quiet civil settlement. Money back, papers torn up. Nobody goes to prison. Some men, in your shoes, would take that. He's your son." He let it sit. "And there's a road that ends with everything. Criminal charges. The whole truth in the light. I work either one. But I need to know which road we're on before I make another move." Outside, the wind howled down the empty grade I had nearly died on. I thought of Celia's 7th line, folded in my shirt pocket against my chest. I thought of the walnut tree she planted on our wedding day, and the lease with my forged name selling the ground beneath it. I thought of my son's voice saying the cold does the rest. I closed the folder. "All the way," I said. "Every dollar, every lie, every name. We take it all the way." Bellamy nodded as if he had expected nothing less, and slid a burner phone across the table to me. "Then the first thing we do," he said, "is make sure your son still believes you're alone out there in the dark." Bellamy drove me home through the night. We did not take the highway my son would expect. We came down out of the mountains on a county route, then crossed the dark farmland east of the city, and we did not speak much. There was nothing to say that the folder had not already said. Somewhere past midnight, the lights of Pittsburgh rose ahead of us, and a little after 1 in the morning he let me out at the end of my own street and told me to walk the last block alone in case anyone was watching the house. No one was, but it was good practice. From that night on, I would assume I was always being watched. The house was cold and dark and smelled of the bread I had not baked. I did not turn on the porch light. I let myself in the back and stood a long while in the kitchen with my coat still on, listening to the old place tick and settle around me, the way it had every night for 40 years. I should have felt relief. I was alive. I had walked into a trap with my eyes open and walked back out of it. And I had the proof I had gone there to get. But relief was not what I felt. What I felt, standing in that dark kitchen, was a grief so heavy it bent my shoulders. Because the proof I had gone there to get was proof of what my own son was. I made coffee, though it was the middle of the night, because the ritual is older than reason. I poured it into Celia's blue mug. Then I took her folded list from my shirt pocket, smoothed it flat on the counter, and turned it over to the blank side. I borrowed nothing from memory. I wrote it all down in plain block letters. The way a man writes a recipe he means to follow exactly. Eugene Richard, the law. Jesse Castillo, the books. Bellamy Solomon, the proof. Each name, and beside it, the thing that name would do. 40 years in business had taught me that anger is useless, and proof is everything. And that a plan written down is a plan you can keep your hand steady around. Celia had taught me the rest. Don't let love blind you to the truth. I had stopped letting it. The trouble was that the truth, once you stop hiding from it, does not stop hurting. At 7 that morning, I called Eugene. He had been our lawyer for 30 years, had drawn up the wills, had sat with Celia and me at his mahogany desk, and helped us decide what would happen to everything we had built. He was 72 now, slower in the body but not anywhere else. And when I told him, in flat, plain words, what had happened on that mountain, there was a silence on the line so long I thought the call had dropped. "Lennon," he said finally, and his voice was not steady. "You're certain you're all right?" "I'm alive." "That is not the same thing." "No," I said, "it isn't." He told me to come to his office the next day, that he would clear his calendar, that I was to talk to no one and sign nothing and answer no calls from my son until we had spoken. Then he said something that stayed with me. "For 30 years I have helped people protect what they love from strangers," he said. "I never once drew up a wall to keep a man's own child out. We are going to have to build something I have never built." I thanked him and hung up, and almost at once the phone buzzed in my hand. A text, not from my son, from Jesse Castillo, who had run my flagship bakery for 20 years and was the most honest man I knew. "Boss," it read. "Dakari called the shop this morning, asking if you'd come in or phoned anybody. Said he hadn't heard from you and was worried. I told him I hadn't seen you. Didn't feel right. Everything okay?" I read it twice. Then I typed back, "Everything's fine. Don't tell him anything. I'll explain soon." The 3 dots appeared, vanished, appeared again. He didn't sound worried. Jesse wrote, "That's the thing." He sounded like he was checking something off a list. I set the phone face down on the counter and looked out the window at the gray morning coming up over the rooftops. My son had not called the bakery to learn whether his father was safe. He had called to learn whether his father was still out there in the cold, breaking, or already broken, ready to sign whatever was put in front of him. He was not asking if I was alive. He was calculating whether the mountain had finished the job he could not finish himself. I picked up Celia's mug, and the coffee had gone cold. And I drank it anyway. Necessary, not comforting. Then I went upstairs to wash the mountain off my skin and to ready myself for the work that was coming, because the man who left me to die was about to learn that he had mistaken my patience for weakness, and there is no more dangerous mistake a man can make. Eugene's office looked like a place where wars were planned, and that morning it was. He had cleared the long conference table behind his desk and covered it with paper. Bank statements in neat fanned rows. The forged orchard lease under a glass paperweight. A legal pad already dense with his careful hand. The blinds were half drawn against the gray light, and a pot of coffee sat untouched on the credenza, going cold, because nobody in that room had any appetite for comfort. Bellamy stood at one end with his folder. Jesse Castillo sat stiff in a chair that was too soft for him, a leather portfolio on his knees, his cap turned over and over in his big, flour-scarred hands. He stood when I came in and gripped my arm hard, and did not trust himself to speak for a moment. "Boss," he finally managed. "If I'd known what they were planning, I'd have driven up that mountain myself and brought you home." "I know you would," I said. "Sit down. Jesse, we have work to do, and I need every one of you thinking clearly." Eugene took the head of the table and set his glasses on the bridge of his nose. "Lennon, what we build today has to hold from 5 directions at once. They will push on every one of them. And if even one wall is thin, the whole thing leaks. So we reinforce each layer with the next." He set the first document before me, squaring it to the edge of the table out of old habit. Layer 1. We revoke the power of attorney, not the forged one. The real one you signed 2 years ago after your heart scare. The one they have been quietly using ever since. Notarized tomorrow morning. Then dispatched to every bank and every brokerage. Certified mail and fax and encrypted email. All at the same hour. How long until it takes effect? Legally, the instant the seal touches paper. In practice, the banks are slower than the law. 8 business days, perhaps 9, before the older systems all catch up to it. "So for 8 days, I said slowly, Dakari can still reach my money. Eugene's mouth thinned into a hard line. He can try. And every dollar he touches in that window becomes a dated, time-stamped record of a man stealing from accounts he has just been formally told are no longer his to touch. We are not only cutting him off, Lennon. We are handing him 8 days of rope and letting his own greed decide what he does with it." He moved to the next folder, thicker than the first. Layer 2, an irrevocable trust. We move the orchard and all 11 bakeries beyond the reach of any power of attorney, real or forged, the very moment we file with the court. Once it is done, no signature on this earth, not yours under duress, not his by fraud, can sell that ground out from under you. The orchard. I thought of Celia kneeling in the spring dirt beneath the walnut tree, the blossoms in her hair, and I said nothing, only nodded once and let him go on. Layer 3, Eugene continued. A report to Adult Protective Services. By the law of this state, a credible report of elder abuse compels an investigation whether you wish it or not. It puts the weight of the government on your side, independent of anything you choose to do. Layer 4, a referral to the district attorney for the criminal side of this. the abandonment on that mountain, the forgery, the theft. And Layer 5, we protect the company itself. We lock down the ownership of Henson's hearth so tightly that he cannot sell, cannot borrow against, cannot so much as mortgage a single oven. 5 walls. I looked at them spread across that table, each one drawn by a man's hand to keep my own son out of the life his mother and I had built, loaf by loaf. And I felt the grief again, low and steady, like a fire banked for a long, cold night. "Show him the books, Jesse," Eugene said gently. Jesse opened his portfolio with the reluctance of a man opening a coffin. "I started catching it in September. Boss, same time you did." I didn't say a word because at first I wasn't sure. And then, because I was scared that if he knew I was looking, he'd wipe the trail clean. He laid the pages out one by one. 4 big wounds, a vendor that doesn't exist, paid $80,000 over 4 months for flour we never once received. Cash draws on the operating account, $210,000, all of it booked as supplies, none of it ever on a single shelf in a single store. That forged lease, signing your orchard to a shell company, and a maintenance contract, $90,000, to an outfit I traced to nothing but a rented mailbox 3 states away. He set the final tally on the table and could not bring himself to look at it. "All told," Jesse said quietly, "near $400,000 already gone, and the lease puts the orchard itself in play. This isn't a man who panicked last week. Boss, this has been running, careful and cold, for the better part of a year. 400,000. The number sat in the room like a body nobody wanted to name. I sat back in the chair and felt the cold of that mountain again, the patience of it, the way it had crept into me one small theft at a time. My son had done the very same thing to my whole life. Quietly, patiently, 1 line in a ledger at a time, betting I was too old and too buried in my grief to ever notice. "We start tomorrow," I said, "all 5 layers. Move on, every one of them at once." Eugene gathered his pages, but he did not stand. Instead, he drew one last folder from his desk drawer, a thin one I had not seen, and rested his hand flat on top of it for a moment, the way a man steadies himself before delivering bad news. "There is one more thing," he said, "before we go to war on this scale. Bellamy brought it to me late last night, and I have not slept an hour since." He looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "It concerns your daughter-in-law, Lennon. Before you sign your name to anything tomorrow morning, there is something about Mila that you need to see." Bellamy set the thin folder on the table in front of me, and across the front, in red, was a single stamped word: confidential. "I want to say this plainly before you open it," he said, "because once you see it, you cannot unsee it, and it changes how you have to think about every piece of this." He paused. "Your son is a thief and worse, but your son is not the architect of what happened to you on that mountain. His wife is—" I opened the folder. The first page was a photograph I knew. Mila's face, composed and cool. The same face that had smiled at me like glass across a dozen family dinners. But the name beneath it was wrong. Davina Arias. It read, date of birth, a year that did not match the one she gave, and a line that stopped my breath. Legal name change filed 8 years ago, 1 week after her wedding to my son. Her name was Davina Arias, until she married Dakari," Bellamy said. "1 week after the ceremony, she petitioned the court and became Mila Henson. Clean break. If you search for Davina Arias in any ordinary database today, you find almost nothing. She buried that name on purpose." I turned the page. Employment records, a wealth management firm in Phoenix, then a private investment office in Denver, then nothing. "She worked client accounts at both firms," Bellamy went on. "She was quietly let go from the second one after an internal review found money moving through accounts in ways it should not have moved. No charges. The firm didn't want the headlines, and the regulators opened a file and then closed it for lack of evidence. She knew precisely how far she could push before it became something a prosecutor could touch. And she stopped a half-step short. Every time. Eugene spoke from the head of the table, his voice quiet and grim. "She is not an amateur who married into a windfall and got greedy. Lennon, she is a professional. She has a pattern. And a pattern in front of a jury is the difference between a family dispute that turned ugly and a calculated predator who hunts." I looked at the photograph, at the cool glass smile, and I remembered a Thanksgiving 3 years back. Mila leaning toward me over the pie, asking in the softest voice whether my affairs were all in order, whether I had thought about who would manage things, just so you're protected. Lennon. I had thought it was kindness. I had thought, God help me, that she cared. "How did you find the real name?" I asked. My voice did not sound like my own. "Fingerprints." Bellamy turned another page. "She applied for a state license in Phoenix years ago and had to be printed. The record outlived the name change. Once I had the prints, the rest came apart like wet paper. Davina Arias, 2 firms, 1 regulatory file, and a marriage entered into 1 month after she first set eyes on your son at an investment seminar he attended for work." The room was very still. Outside, the gray winter light pressed at the half-drawn blinds. She had not fallen in love with my son. She had identified a man whose father had built something worth taking, and she had moved on him the way she moved on a client account, with patience and a plan. Dakari, my weak and frightened son, drowning in a debt to a man like Kelvin Villegas, had been the perfect instrument. He had the access. He had the name. He had a grief he could be steered through, and a resentment of his father she could feed until it caught fire. He was the hammer. She had only ever needed to point him. "He doesn't know," I said. It was not a question. "I'd stake my license on it," Bellamy said. "I'd bet she was Mila to him from the first night. No Phoenix, no Denver, no file. Just a sharp, beautiful financial analyst who happened to find him fascinating. He has no idea who he married. And then the thought arrived that turned the cold in my chest to ice. There was a child in that house. My granddaughter, Deleza, 14 years old, living under the same roof as a woman who researched people the way a butcher studies a carcass, and a father who had just left his own dad to freeze rather than disappoint her. "Bellamy," I said slowly. "Deleza is in that house." Bellamy and Eugene exchanged a look that I did not like at all. "I know," Bellamy said, "and we will get to her. But if we move on the girl too fast, before the walls are up, they'll know exactly how much we know, and they'll run. Or worse, they'll use her. We need a few more days. A few more days." The words sat in me like stones. My granddaughter, 14 years old. Asleep tonight down the hall from a serial predator wearing my family's name, and the son who had handed her his soul to do it. I closed the folder over the cool glass smile and the name she had spent 8 years burying. Then we'd better not waste a single one of them. I said. The call came at 9 o'clock that night, from a number I did not know. I had spent the evening alone at my kitchen table, a book open in front of me that I had not read a single word of. The house dark except for the small lamp over the sink. Outside, the snow had stopped, and the street was that hushed blue-white that comes after a storm, every sound swallowed. When the phone lit up on the table, my first thought was that it was Dakari again, calling from some borrowed number now that I had stopped answering his own. I almost let it ring out. Then some old instinct that had served me well at the bakery for 40 years, made me reach for it. Hello, Grandpa. The voice was young and thin and raw. The voice of a girl who had been crying for a long time and was trying very hard not to start again. Delisa. I sat up straight, my heart turning over in my chest. Sweetheart, where are you? Are you all right? I'm in my room. I'm using my friend Hannah's old phone, the one Mom doesn't know I have. She drew a shaky breath. Grandpa, I know what they did. I know what Mom and Dad did to you up on the mountain. I've known they were planning something for 2 whole months, and I was too scared to tell you, and I'm so sorry. I closed my eyes. 2 months. A 14-year-old child. Carrying that weight alone. In silence. For 2 months. You have nothing to be sorry for, I said, keeping my voice as steady and warm as I could make it. Nothing at all. Do you hear me? Now tell me what's been happening from the beginning. They talk in their room at night. They think I'm asleep. But the heating vent in my closet, it runs right through to theirs, and I can hear everything through the wall. The words came faster now, tumbling out, like water finding a crack in a dam. I heard them talk about money, about papers they needed you to sign, about a man named Kelvin they owe a lot to, and about a drive up to the mountains, about the cold. Her voice cracked clean in half. Dad said you'd call him by dark and beg to come home. When you didn't call, Grandpa, I lay in my bed and I thought you were dead. I thought my own dad had killed you. And I just sat there in the dark and listened to it happen and did nothing. I'm alive, I said firmly. I'm right here, talking to you. A good man found me and pulled me out of the cold, and I am safe, and I am not going anywhere. Deleza, listen to me. Why didn't you tell anyone, a teacher, a neighbor, anyone? There was a long silence on the line. So long I thought the call had dropped, because Dad said if I ever opened my mouth, he'd send me away to a boarding school in another state. Her voice went very small and very young. He said it 3 different times. Grandpa, 3 times. On 3 different nights. Like he was practicing the words for when he really did it. So I kept quiet. But she stopped. I did something else instead. Something I wasn't supposed to. What did you do, sweetheart? You can tell me anything. I recorded them. I gripped the edge of the kitchen table, the solid old oak of it, the same table where she had rolled out cookie dough as a little girl. And I held on to steady myself. On my phone, she went on, the words rushing now that the worst of them was out. Every single time I heard them through that vent, I'd hit record and hold my breath. I was so scared they'd find it. So I backed it all up to a cloud account they don't know anything about. One I made on a computer at the library. I've been doing it for 6 weeks. Grandpa, there's a lot. Hours and hours of it. 6 weeks. While the lawyer I paid and the detective I had hired pieced the truth together out of bank records and old fingerprints. A frightened 14-year-old girl, alone in that house, had been quietly building the most damning evidence of all, because recording was the only scrap of power a child had, the only way she could prove to herself that what she was hearing through the wall was real and not some nightmare she had dreamed. "Deliza," I said, and now I had to stop and steady my own voice. "Listen to me very carefully. What you did took more courage than most grown men ever find in a lifetime. I am so proud of you I can hardly speak, and I promise you, on your grandmother's memory, you are never going to any boarding school. You are coming home to me. You will be safe, and this whole thing is going to end. Do you believe me?" "I believe you," she whispered. Then, smaller still, "Grandpa, I'm so scared. I know you are. Just hold on a little while longer. Can you send me the recordings tonight? Quietly, when it's safe. I'll send them right now." I heard her moving, the soft, careful sounds of a girl hiding inside her own bedroom. Then she hesitated. "Grandpa, there's one I want you to hear before the others. From the morning you all drove off, it's Dad's voice. He's reading off numbers, like mile markers, and how far the phone signal goes dead, and—" she swallowed hard. "And how cold it would get out there." He was smiling. Grandpa. I couldn't see him, but I could hear him smiling. The kitchen seemed to go very still around me, the lamp humming over the sink, the blue dark pressing at the windows. "There's a lot of recordings," she said. "Hours. But that one's about the mountain. And it's the one that scares me the most." Eugene called me the next morning before I had finished my coffee, and his very first words were the ones I had been dreading. He came within days of selling the orchard out from under you. "Lennon, 3 weeks ago, while you were still sitting at that kitchen table thinking your boy was only distant." I set the blue mug down slowly. "How close? Closer than I want to put into words." He took the forged lease to a commercial developer, a man named Porter, who's been buying up that whole rezoned strip along the highway for a shopping plaza. Dakari used the power of attorney as his authority and offered the parcel at a price well below what the land is worth. The way a man prices a thing he is desperate to be rid of in a hurry. Porter's people drew up a purchase agreement. They were a signature away from closing. I closed my eyes and saw it all. The apple rose Celia and I planted in our 40s, our backs aching, laughing about it. The cherry trees that turned pink every April like the whole yard was blushing. The walnut tree at the center, the one she planted our wedding day, the one she was kneeling beside when her heart stopped. My son had come within days of paving every bit of it into a parking lot to pay off a loan shark, and he had tried to do it with my own forged name on the page. "What stopped it?" I asked. Porter did, as it happens. Something about the deal smelled wrong to him. The rush, the cut-rate price, a seller's agent he'd never once dealt with. He's a careful man. And careful men ask one more question than they need to. He asked for the original signed lease and a direct word with the actual property owner. Dakari stalled him, made excuses, so Porter walked away from the table. Eugene let that hang a moment. If Porter had been even a little greedier. Lennon, the ground your wife is buried in would belong to a developer this morning, and there would have been precious little we could do to claw it back. A careful man asking one more question. That was the whole of what had stood between Celia's orchard and a bulldozer. I thought of her second line, the one I read every morning. Never sign what you have not read twice. Even a stranger had lived by it that day. My own son had not. Will Porter speak to us? He already has. He's prepared to testify that Dakari approached him with the forged lease and the power of attorney, trying to sell land he had no right to sell. It corroborates everything else we have. And I've drafted an injunction that will freeze any attempt to sell or transfer that land the moment we file it tomorrow alongside the trust. I let out a slow breath. Good. What else is there? There's something else, Eugene said. And this part is no longer entirely in our hands. Can you come to the office at 1 o'clock? There's a woman from the state coming in, and you'll want to hear this from her directly rather than from me. Her name was Liliana Randolph, and she arrived at Eugene's office at 1 o'clock exactly. A composed woman in her 40s, carrying a state-issued tablet, and the calm, unhurried authority of someone who had seen every shade of cruelty that families inflict upon their own, and was no longer surprised by any of it. Mr. Henson, she said, settling into the chair across from Eugene and me. I'm an investigator with Adult Protective Services. I want you to understand exactly why I'm here. Because it isn't because you asked me to come. She opened her file on the desk. 2 separate reports were filed about you within 12 hours of one another. The first came from a licensed private investigator named Bellamy Solomon, with video footage and documentation attached. The second came from a man named Roger Cabrera, who called our hotline to say he had found an elderly man left to freeze at a rest stop up in the Alleghenies, and that he hadn't been able to stop thinking about it, and needed someone to look into it. Roger, the plumber who had stopped to use a bathroom and then could not let the thing go. I felt my throat tighten, and I had to look down at my hands for a moment. Under the law of this Commonwealth, Liliana continued, a credible report of elder abuse triggers a mandatory investigation. We do not require your permission to proceed. Mr. Henson, and with all respect to you, we will proceed, whether or not you choose to pursue anything on your own. This has stopped being a private matter between you and your family. The state has an interest in it now, and my son, I asked, when will he find out? She consulted the tablet. We're required by law to make contact with him within 48 hours. He will be formally notified that an investigation has been opened in his name, and he will be required to sit down and give us a statement. 48 hours. I sat back in the chair and let the number settle over me. For days now, my son had been calling the bakery, calling my silent phone in the night, waiting in the dark to learn whether the mountain had finally broken his father. He believed himself the hunter still, patient and unhurried, waiting for his wounded prey to crawl back and sign. He did not know the ground had already moved under his feet. He did not know about the trust, or the injunction freezing the orchard, or the recordings a 14-year-old girl had been making through a vent in her closet wall, night after frightened night. And in 48 hours, while he sat there, still waiting for my desperate, broken phone call, The state of Pennsylvania was going to knock on his door instead. The phone rang for the 12th time that day, and for the 12th time, I let it ring. It sat on the kitchen table, face up, my son's name glowing in the gray afternoon light. I watched it the way you watch a wasp that has come into the house, with a kind of calm attention, knowing that the worst thing you can do is swat at it. 12 calls since the morning, each one a little longer than the last. The rings climbing. 8, 10, 12. Before the voicemail, he never left, cut them off. He would not leave a message. To leave a message would mean putting into words the thing he had done. He still thinks I'll answer, I said to the empty chair across from me, to Celia, the way I had every day for 4 years. He still thinks there's a price that buys him back. The phone went dark. Then, 2 minutes later, it lit up again. I had learned something in 40 years of standing behind a counter, watching men come in to argue over a bill or a burned order. There is a great power in silence. Most men cannot bear it. They will fill it with noise, with offers, with threats, anything to make the quiet stop. And in the filling, they show you exactly what they are. Dakari had never once in his life been able to sit inside a silence. So I gave him a wide and patient one, and I let it do its work. While the phone rang, I went to war on paper. That morning, Eugene and I had stood in a notary's office downtown and watched the seal come down on the revocation of the power of attorney. One small metal strike that severed my son's legal hold on everything I owned. The instant it touched the page, in the eyes of the law, his authority was gone. We had sent the notice out the same hour to every bank and brokerage at once, certified and faxed and emailed all together. For 8 days, the banks will still be catching up. Eugene had warned me. Their old systems won't all turn over at once. He may still be able to reach some accounts in that window. Let him, I had said. Every dollar he touches now is theft from accounts he's been told are no longer his. Let him dig. Then we had built the wall that mattered most. We filed the irrevocable trust that same afternoon, and into it we placed the orchard and all 11 bakeries, beyond the reach of any signature, real or forged. Henson's hearth and the ground Celia was buried in now stood behind a door that no power of attorney on earth could open. My son had spent months trying to steal a fortune, and he had only succeeded in guaranteeing he could never touch the heart of it. But it was the last folder Eugene opened that stopped me cold. There is one more asset. Lenin, he said, sliding it across the desk. One I think you've forgotten you have. Celia set it up the year after her first scare with her heart. She came to me alone. She didn't want it in the family ledger, didn't want it spoken of. A separate parcel out past the county line, and a savings account beside it. She called it the quiet one. I opened the folder, and there was Celia's handwriting in the margin of the original deed. That careful blue slant I knew better than my own. For whoever needs protecting. She had written. I sat very still. I had forgotten. Or I had let myself forget. The way you let yourself forget the things that hurt to remember. Celia, sitting at this kitchen table after the doctor scared us both, telling me quietly that she wanted one thing set aside that nobody knew about. Not the accountants, not even Dakari. Why? I had asked her. Because someday, she'd said, somebody is going to look at everything we built and decide it belongs to them. And when that day comes, I want one thing they can't find. One thing for whoever still deserves it. She had known. 6 years before the mountain, before Mila's true name, before any of it, she had known that someone would come, and she had built a small, quiet vault and left it waiting. This one doesn't go in the trust, I told Eugene, and my voice was not quite steady. This one is Deliza's, all of it, separate, set apart so that no matter what happens to her parents, that girl has ground under her feet and a future that doesn't depend on either of them. Eugene made a note, and his old hand was not quite steady either. Accessible when she's grown, he said softly. Celia's vault, going to Celia's granddaughter. She would like that. Lennon. I drove home as the early dark came down, and the phone on the seat beside me lit up one more time with my son's name. Call 13. I let it ring out into the silence, and I did not feel the old pull to answer it anymore. My son believed he had drawn the map of everything I owned and found every corner of it worth taking. He never knew that the woman he helped put in the ground had hidden one last thing away. Not for him. For the only one in this whole ruined family who still deserved to be protected. Bellamy opened his laptop, turned it toward me, and said 4 words that changed everything I thought I understood. This was not desperation. We were in his office, a small plain room above a hardware store, the blinds drawn against the afternoon, the hum of a space heater, the only sound besides my own pulse. On the screen was a web browser history, dated and time-stamped, line after line of it. This is from a laptop in your son's house, Bellamy said. The home machine. Deliza's recordings told me what to look for, so I went and got the rest. The searches are logged to your daughter-in-law's user account. Her login, her hours, the times of day she's alone in that house. He scrolled slowly. Read the dates first. Then read the searches. I read. The first entries were from late September, 3 full months before the mountain. How to prove diminished mental capacity, elderly Pennsylvania. Below it, an hour later. Contesting an irrevocable trust, undue influence. Then, days later, power of attorney, elderly parent, dementia signs. Then, in October, a consultation logged with an attorney whose specialty was challenging the competency of the elderly. I made myself keep reading, though my hands had gone cold against the desk. She wasn't only researching how to take it from me, I said. My voice did not sound like my own. She was researching how to make people believe I'd lost my mind. That's exactly what she was doing, Bellamy said. Laying the groundwork. If you ever fought back, if you ever told anyone your son was stealing from you, she wanted a paper trail ready that made you sound like a confused old man imagining things. She was building your incompetence months before she built your death. He scrolled to the bottom of the page, and there it was. November the 18th. 1 line. Hypothermia survival time, elderly cold exposure. The space heater ticked in the silence. Outside, a truck rumbled past on the street below. I have built things my whole life. I have framed roofs in the heat and laid foundations in the frost, negotiated with suppliers who tried to cheat me, and survived 2 recessions that closed every other bakery on my block. Very little shakes me anymore. But to sit in that small room and watch my daughter-in-law's own hand, weeks before the storm, search for exactly how long it takes an old man to freeze to death, the way I might look up a recipe that reached into me and turned something to ice. She researched my death, I said slowly. The way I'd research a flower order? Yes. Bellamy did not look away. And it all ties back to one man. He brought up another file. Kelvin Villegas, the lender. Your son didn't just borrow from him, he got buried by him. 40% interest. Compounding. Villegas had Dakari by the throat. And Mila saw an opportunity in that. A husband desperate enough to do anything. And a father with $30 million in property sitting between them and clear. She didn't create your son's weakness. She found it. And she sharpened it. And she pointed it at you. I closed my eyes. I thought of the recording Delisa had sent me the night before, the one she said scared her most. I had listened to it alone in my dark kitchen at 2 a.m, my son's voice reading off mile markers and dead zones, his voice light, almost cheerful. The cold does the rest. I had thought, hearing it, that I had finally touched the bottom of the thing. I had been wrong. The bottom was here, in a browser history dated 3 months before, in a search made by a steady hand on an ordinary autumn afternoon. How long can we prove she planned it? I asked. From September. Documented. Time-stamped. Tied to her account. Forensically imaged with the chain of custody clean. Bellamy folded his hands. This isn't a robbery that went too far. Mr. Henson, this is premeditation. With Delisa's recordings and these searches and Roger's dash cam, a prosecutor doesn't have to argue that your son made a cruel mistake in the heat of a moment. He can argue that your daughter-in-law planned for 3 months to make you disappear, and that your son carried it out. I sat back in the chair and let it settle. All of it. The full and final shape of what had been done to me. I had told myself a story, these past months, to make it bearable. That my son had been weak, that he had been drowning, and panicked, and made a terrible choice in a desperate hour. That somewhere under it all, there was still a frightened boy who had simply lost his way. But that was a robbery I could understand, almost forgive. This was something else. This was patient. This was planned on quiet afternoons, researched and consulted and rehearsed, and then driven up a mountain in a borrowed truck and left to do its work in the snow. She had not planned to take my money. She had planned a funeral, mine. The phone rang while the 3 of us sat in Eugene's office, and this time I answered it. 19 days had passed since the mountain. 19 days of silence on my end, while Dakari called and called into the dark. But this call was different. The screen showed his name, and beneath it I saw it was a real call. His own number, not a borrowed one. He had finally stopped waiting for me to break. He had decided to come to the table himself. I looked across the desk at Eugene, then at Bellamy standing by the window. I pressed the speaker button and set the phone down on the wood between us, so they could both hear. So there would be witnesses to whatever my son chose to say. Hello, Dakari. Dad. His voice came through the little speaker, and it was the rehearsed brightness all over again, the salesman's warmth. Thank God, I've been worried sick. You won't return my calls. You won't talk to me. We need to fix this. We need to talk about a resolution. A resolution, I said. Yeah. Look, I drew up some terms. Fair ones. I think there's a deal here that works for both of us. He pressed on, the words coming fast. A man who had rehearsed this in the mirror. You hand me operating control of the bakeries, 60%, and you step back into an advisory role, clean and simple. You keep your dignity. I get the company running right, and all this ugliness just goes away. Everybody wins. Across the desk, Eugene's jaw had gone tight. Bellamy stood very still by the window. I let the silence stretch a moment, the way I had learned to. Then I asked him the only question that mattered. Dakari, when you drove away from that rest stop, and you looked in your mirror and saw me standing in the snow. I kept my voice level, almost gentle. Did it cross your mind, even once, that I might die out there? The line went quiet. 1 second. 2. 3. I could hear him breathing. Dad, come on, he said finally. Don't be dramatic. It's not a dramatic question. It's a simple one. You left me in a snowstorm at 69 years old, 15 miles from a town, with 2 frozen water bottles. Did you think I would die? Another pause. And then he said it. 4 words, in the easy, careless tone of a man stating something obvious. You're tough, Dad. You'll be fine. There it was. Not a denial. Not a flicker of fear at what he had nearly done. Not 1 word of sorrow. He spoke as though we were discussing whether I could handle a long flight, or carry a heavy box up the stairs. You're tough. You'll be fine. As if leaving his own father to freeze had been a reasonable bet, a calculated risk that had simply paid off. And now we could get back to the business of dividing what was mine. I had spent 19 days bracing for many things from my son. Excuses, lies, even, God help me, some small hope that there might be remorse. I had not braced for this. For nothing at all. For a man who looked at his father's near death and saw only a negotiating position. I looked at the phone on the desk, at his name glowing on the screen, and I felt the last thread of something inside me go quiet and still. Not break, just go quiet. The way a kitchen goes quiet at the end of a long day when the ovens are finally cold. Goodbye, Dakari, I said. Dad, wait. We haven't even talked about the... I pressed the button and ended the call. The office was silent. Eugene took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose, and would not look at me for a moment. Bellamy turned from the window, and there was something close to fury in his flat, steady eyes, the controlled anger of a man who has seen a great many bad things and is still, after all of it, capable of being sickened. He framed it as a business deal, Eugene said quietly, attempted murder, and he opened with an offer. Yes, I said. I had wanted, in some buried corner of myself, to find a bottom to my son, a floor beneath which he would not go, a place where the boy I taught to knead dough still lived. I had told myself that on that mountain he had simply fallen, and that somewhere down there I might still reach him. Now I understood. There was no bottom. There was no floor. There was only a man who had run the numbers on his own father's life and found them acceptable, and who had called, 19 days later, not to ask whether I was alive, but to ask what I would give him now that I was. I slid Celia's folded list from my pocket and set it on the desk beside the silent phone. Don't let love blind you to the truth. All right, I said. No more waiting. We end this. On the 8th day, my son's credit card was declined in front of a crowded restaurant, and the house he had built on stolen money began to fall. Bellamy told me about it afterward, pieced together from the staff and from what Deliza later said. Dakari and Mila had gone out to dinner, the kind of expensive place where being seen mattered. And at the end of the meal, the waiter returned the platinum card with the small, apologetic smile reserved for public humiliation. Declined. Dakari handed over a second card. Declined. A third. The business account. Declined. 8 days. Exactly as Eugene had promised. The last of the bank systems had finally caught up to the revocation, and one by one the accounts had closed their doors to him in the same hour. The man who had tried to steal a fortune could no longer pay for a steak dinner. Mila, by every account, did not panic. She sat across from her husband while the cards came back one after another, and she watched him with a cold, measuring stillness, the way a woman watches a stock she has already decided to sell. She paid the bill herself, in cash, without a word. And then she drove home and began, quietly, to save herself. Because Mila had seen this coming long before the card stopped working. She retained her own attorney 3 days ago, Bellamy said, laying the paperwork on my kitchen table. A criminal defense firm, the expensive kind. And my contact at the district attorney's office tells me her lawyer has already reached out about a cooperation deal. She's offering to testify. Testify to what? That Dakari planned all of it. That he coerced her. That she's a frightened wife who went along out of fear of her own husband. Bellamy's mouth twisted. She's painting herself as a victim, the architect, handing the prosecutor the hammer and walking away clean. I almost laughed, though there was nothing in it that was funny. The woman who had researched my death on quiet autumn afternoons, who had pointed my weak and frightened son at me like a loaded gun, was now preparing to testify that he had forced her hand, and she would do it well. She had spent her whole life learning exactly how far to push and exactly when to cut a thing loose. Now the thing she was cutting loose was my son. Let her, I said. We don't need her testimony. We have the recordings. We have her own browser history. We have the dash cam and the forged lease and a fingerprint that turns Mila Henson back into Davina Arias in front of any jury in this state. She can paint herself however she likes. The truth is already on paper. There's one more thing, Bellamy said, and for the first time that morning, something in his face softened. And it's good news. For once. That was when I heard the footsteps on my porch. I had not been expecting anyone. I went to the door, and there on the step, in a coat too thin for the cold, with a backpack over one shoulder and a face pale from a sleepless night, stood my granddaughter, Delisa. I couldn't stay there anymore. Grandpa. Her voice shook. Mom and Dad have been screaming at each other for 2 days, about the money, about lawyers, about whose fault it all is. And this morning, Mom told me to pack a bag because we were going to her sister's. And she swallowed. I told her I was going to school, and I took the bus here instead. I pulled her inside out of the cold, and I held her. This brave 14-year-old girl who had recorded a conspiracy through a vent in her wall, and then walked out of that house under her own power. And I felt something in my chest that I hadn't felt in 19 days. Not vindication. Not the cold satisfaction of a trap closing. Something warmer and far older than either of those. You're safe now, I told her, my hand on the back of her head. You hear me? You are home, and you are safe, and you are never going back to that house. Behind me. Bellamy quietly gathered his papers and let himself out, leaving us to it. Later, after Delisa had eaten and finally fallen asleep in the spare room that still smelled faintly of her grandmother's lavender. Bellamy texted me. Mila left this afternoon. Took one suitcase. Didn't even tell the husband where she was going. He came home to an empty house and a stack of legal notices on the floor. I stood at the kitchen window in the dark, looking out at the orchard, the bare winter branches silver under the moon, the walnut tree at the center, where Celia had knelt for the last time. By morning, my son would learn that his wife had betrayed him before his own father ever did, that the woman he had handed his soul to had researched his father's death, pointed him up that mountain, and then, the instant the money dried up, walked out the door and offered him to the prosecutors to save herself. He had left me to freeze for her, and she had not even said goodbye. Assistant District Attorney Alec Hinton had the tired, careful eyes of a man who read case files at midnight and remembered every line of them. He met Eugene and me in a gray office that smelled of old coffee and older carpet, and he spread our evidence across his desk the way a surgeon lays out instruments. The recordings Delisa had made. The browser history dated 3 months before the storm. Roger's dash cam footage. Jesse's audit. The forged lease. And the fingerprint that turned my daughter-in-law back into Davina Arias. "Mr. Henson," he said when he had gone through it all. "In 15 years, I have rarely seen a case this complete. The browser searches establish premeditation. The recordings establish conspiracy. The dash cam and your medical records from that night establish the attempt itself." He set down his pen. "This is, frankly, ironclad. So let me ask you the question I don't usually get to ask. What is it you want?" It was not the question I had expected. I had come prepared to demand everything. I sat with it a moment. "I want you to understand the difference between the two of them," I said. "Because the law is about to treat my son and his wife as one thing. And they are not one thing." Hinton leaned back. "Go on. My son is weak. He's a coward. And a thief. And on that mountain he did something I will never fully forgive. But he didn't plan it. He was drowning in a debt to a loan shark. And his wife found that weakness and sharpened it, and aimed it at me. She researched my death in September. He only carried out in December what she'd been building for 3 months. I kept my voice level. "I'm not asking you to excuse what Dakari did. I'm asking you to see that he was the hammer, and she was the hand that swung it. And what does that mean, in terms of what you'd accept?" Eugene slid a single page across the desk, the proposal we had drawn up the night before. "For Dakari," I said, "a guilty plea, a suspended sentence, contingent on full probation. 500 hours of community service, working with the elderly, and full restitution, every dollar he took, paid back over time." I paused. "He lives. He learns. He spends years earning back what he tried to steal in one afternoon." Hinton read the page, then looked up. "And for Mrs. Henson Davina Arias. Everything," I said. "She planned a murder on quiet afternoons while my granddaughter slept down the hall. She brought a 14-year-old child into a house she was using as a base for a conspiracy. She has done this before to other people and walked away clean every time. For her, I want everything the law allows." Hinton was quiet for a long moment. "You're asking for mercy for your son," he said slowly, "and the full weight of the law for your daughter-in-law. Restorative justice for one, retribution for the other. I'm asking for consequences that match intent," I said. "That's all. The law should be able to tell the difference between a weak man and a predator. If it can't, then it isn't justice at all." He nodded slowly and made a note. And then he told me something I had not known. "There's a development you should hear," Hinton said. "The lender, Kelvin Villegas. We've been looking into him as part of this, and it turns out your son is far from his only victim. Villegas has been running an unlicensed lending operation across state lines. And there's a money laundering element to it that's drawn federal interest. The FBI took over that piece this morning. He's looking at federal charges, the kind that don't bend." I thought of the man whose 40% interest had buried my son, who had squeezed a desperate man until he was desperate enough to do anything. He had lit the fuse on all of it, and now he would answer to a court far beyond my reach or my mercy. "Then it's nearly done," I said. "Nearly." Hinton gathered the pages. "I'll draw up the offer for your son. He'll have 48 hours from the moment he receives it to accept. If he takes the deal, he testifies against his wife. Everything. The planning. The recordings. All of it. If he refuses, we prosecute them both to the wall." He looked at me. "And Mr. Henson, you should understand. With this evidence, Davina Arias is looking at 15 to 20 years. I understand." Eugene and I walked out into the cold afternoon, and I felt the strange hollow that comes after a long fight when you finally see its end. In my coat pocket, against my chest, where I had carried Celia's list for 19 days. There was something else now. The night before, going through her old desk to find papers for the trust, I had found an envelope, pale green, her good stationery. My name on the front in her careful blue hand. "Open when you need to." I had not opened it yet. I had not been ready. But standing there in the gray light, with the FBI moving on Kelvin Villegas and a prosecutor drawing up the offer that would force my son to choose, I understood the choice that mattered most was not Dakari's at all. In 48 hours, my son would have to decide between his own freedom and the woman who had researched how long it takes an old man to freeze. And I would finally have to find out what my wife had wanted to tell me from the far side of the grave. My son learned the full truth in a courthouse hallway, from a man he had never met. Bellamy told me about it the same day. Dakari had come to the courthouse with his public defender to receive the prosecutor's offer. Gray-faced and thinner than I had ever seen him. A man who had spent 2 weeks watching his life collapse one wall at a time. He was waiting outside the courtroom when Bellamy passed by on his way to another matter. And Dakari, recognizing nothing, paid him no mind. Then Bellamy stopped. "You don't know me," Bellamy said to him, "but I've known you a long time. Since April." Dakari blinked. "I'm sorry. Your father hired me in April, 3 months before you ever drove him up that mountain. I tracked every withdrawal, every meeting, every burner phone call between you and your wife. I was 2 cars behind your rental the whole way out of the city. There was a satellite phone and a set of coordinates ready before you ever turned off the highway." Bellamy let it land. "Your father knew. He knew everything before he ever got in that truck. He let you make your choice. He just made sure you couldn't get away with it." Bellamy said my son stood in that hallway and did not move for a long time, his face going through something that aged him a decade in the space of a minute. He knew the whole time. He let me do it. It was the thing that finally broke through. Bellamy said, "Not the evidence, not the charges. The knowing that his father had seen him clearly, all along. and had still climbed into that truck. He signed the agreement that afternoon. I was not in the room for it, but Eugene was, and he brought me the document that evening. 5 pages, single-spaced, a guilty plea, a suspended sentence, contingent on 5 years of supervised probation, 500 hours of community service to be served with the elderly, full restitution, every dollar, paid back over 60 months, the first payment due within 30 days, and his sworn testimony against the woman he had married, the woman whose real name he was only now learning. His signature was at the bottom of the 4th page, Dakari Henson, in black ink, the hand unsteady. A week later, I agreed to see him. Once, in Eugene's office, with the desk between us. He looked smaller than I remembered. He sat with his hands folded on the table, and for a moment I saw, beneath the gray and the ruin, the boy who had stood on a stool at the bakery counter with flour to his elbows, so proud of a lopsided loaf. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said. His voice broke on the 2nd word. "For all of it. I don't expect you to believe me. But I am." I looked at him for a long while. I thought of the mountain, and the snow, and the taillights vanishing. I thought of a 14-year-old girl recording her own parents through a vent in her wall. And I thought of the boy on the stool. "I believe that you're sorry," I said at last. "I do. But you need to understand something. Son, apology and trust are 2 different things. One you can hand me today, across this table. The other takes a lifetime to earn back, and you may not have enough of one left. That's not cruelty. That's just the truth. And your mother taught me never to flinch from it." He nodded and wiped his eyes, and did not argue. There was nothing to argue. The other matters closed in their own time. Davina Arias, who had been my daughter-in-law, took a guilty plea rather than face a jury with 3 months of her own searches read aloud. And the years she received were many. Kelvin Villegas went into federal custody and stayed there. The orchard sat safe behind its trust. The 11 bakeries kept their doors open, the ovens warm at 4 every morning, and DeLaza came to live with me. We went to family court on a cold, bright morning, and the judge, a steady woman with kind eyes, read the words that reshaped a 14-year-old's future, given the criminal proceedings against both biological parents, and the child's own documented courage in bringing the truth to light. Temporary custody to the paternal grandfather, Lennon Henson, with permanent review to follow. DeLaza sat beside me and let out a long, shaking breath, the breath of someone who had been holding it for years, and she reached over and held my hand, and did not let go. That night, she fell asleep early in the spare room that had been Celia's sewing room, safe under her grandmother's old quilt. I sat alone at the kitchen table in the quiet house, and I took the pale green envelope from my coat pocket, the one with my name on it in Celia's careful blue hand. "Open when you need to," for 19 days, and then for many more. I had carried it unopened. I had not been ready. There had been a war to fight, a granddaughter to bring home, a son to set on the long road back. But the war was over now. The house was quiet. The girl was safe. I turned the envelope over in my hands, and I knew that the time had finally come. Spring came the way it always does in Pennsylvania, slowly, and then all at once. By the middle of April, the walnut tree that Celia and I had planted 40 years ago was in full leaf, and the apple trees behind it had thrown out blossoms so thick that the whole orchard looked dusted with snow. I thought about that. The irony of it, that the same white that had nearly killed me on a mountain now meant nothing but life out here on the land my wife had loved. Deleza walked beside me through the rows. She had grown an inch since December. She carried the green envelope because I had asked her to. And when we reached the bench beneath the walnut tree, the bench I had built with my own hands the year Celia got sick, she handed it to me and sat down close. I opened it. Celia's handwriting had not faded, though the ink was 4 years old. She had written it the spring before she died, in the weeks when she still had the strength to sit out here with me. The letter was short. My wife never wasted words. My Lennon, it read, if you are reading this, then something has gone wrong, and you have probably already discovered that I knew our son better than you let yourself know him. I loved him. So did you. But love that refuses to see is not love. It is fear wearing love's coat. When the truth comes, and it will, do not let it turn you cruel. Catch him. Don't destroy him. There is a difference, and you are good enough to know it. Save what can be saved. Plant something where the rot was, and take care of the girl. She is the best of all of us. All my love. Always. Celia. I read it twice. Then I read the part about catching him to myself a third time, because that was exactly what I had done. I had caught him. I had not destroyed him. I had wanted to, in those first cold days, more than I have ever wanted anything. But somewhere between the rest stop and that office, I had chosen mercy for my son and justice for the ones who had no claim on my mercy. And I had not understood, until that moment, sitting under her tree, that she had reached forward through 4 years and steadied my hand. Deleza was crying. So was I, a little. And I did not bother to hide it from her. What are we going to do with it? She asked. The orchard. I had already decided. But I let her ask, because it was going to be hers one day. We're not going to sell it, I said. Not ever. The trust protects it now. But land like this shouldn't just sit behind a fence. So we're going to open it up, a community garden, and a bakery school. Right here. We'll teach kids who never had anybody to teach them how to make bread. The way I taught your father. The way I'm going to teach you. She wiped her eyes. Who's going to run all of it? The 11 shops. Kai Walls, I said. She's run the Lawrenceville store for 9 years, and she's never once lied to me about a single loaf. She's taking over operations next month. I'm going to be an old man who bakes at 4 in the morning and tells too many stories. That's enough for me now. We sat there a long while. The bees were working the apple blossoms. Somewhere, a long way off, I could hear traffic, the ordinary sound of a world that had kept turning while my own had nearly ended. And then, against all odds, had not. Davina Arias was sentenced to 18 years. Kelvin Villegas is awaiting a federal trial that will take most of his life from him. And Dakari serves his hours in an elder care home 3 days a week, lifting men older than me from their chairs. And I am told he is good at it, and gentle, and that some of them ask for him by name. I do not know if a man can be remade. I know that I left the door open, the way Celia asked me to, and what he walks through it to become is his to decide. If you have listened this far, then maybe you have someone in your own life you have been afraid to see clearly. Maybe you have been telling yourself a comfortable story because the true one would cost too much. I will tell you what I learned at 69 years old, frozen and abandoned and saved by a stranger's headlights. Love is not the absence of truth. Love is what survives the truth. Tell me in the comments about a time the truth saved you, even when it broke your heart first. And if this story meant something to you, subscribe and stay, because there are more stories like it, and you are not alone in them. Doe doesn't lie. People do. But the truth, once you finally let yourself see it, will set the whole orchard blooming.